Okay, looks like everybody's kind of coming back together. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Sure is nice to take a break sometimes. That kind of helps to get everything back moving and flowing again. Awesome. As we're just kind of getting some of these pieces going back together, instead of just moving directly on, what I'd like to do is do a light recap of what we did after lunch. Just kind of, we had a great little session. We had you guys entering items in, different things. We bounced, so you guys created a number of normal POs, and then we actually said, okay, cool, we're going to do a whole nother different kind of PO, and we're going to do an internal build stuff. So, actually, Cheryl.
Well, is the internal build the same as a recipe?
Okay, so what happens, and that's a great question, this internal build PO, if you hit edit right here, it has line items that we pulled into it, and we had to build it one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. If we wanted a recipe, we basically say, you know what, this is exactly what I do every single time. You have one of two options, okay? You could either duplicate the PO, which would be a piece of cake. Say you wanted 10 more of these. You literally could go like this, okay? Duplicate this thing. Tell it where you want it to be. Let me figure out the auto price on it. Duplicate it, and you can actually have, like you could change whatever values you wanted, and you can have another PO that quick. That's one way to do it. That's a miniature, kind of like using a recipe. The actual physical recipe is where you enter the pieces of the puzzle, and then you could actually assign it to this so that you could do mass and bulk different pieces of the puzzle. It's like if you wanted to really prep it. Or say that you had some things where you're like, sometimes I do flats and soil, but I want pumpkin seeds or this or this or this or this, and then I want my output to be this or this or this. You could technically put that into a recipe, and then when you go through it, you're like, oh, I'm just doing pumpkin build. So yes on pumpkin and yes on pumpkin starter kits, okay? But you could have it all prepped if you wanted to. That's what a recipe does. You basically, you build it so that when you go to make it, it happens in bulk or faster instead of one item at a time, one item at a time. That's kind of the difference between them. You don't have to, but it helps speed things up, especially if it's a repetitive process, and that's what you do for part of your business. Okay. Cool. Anyway, I just kind of quickly clicked into the duplicate PO. Yes?
Kind of going off what she's saying, would it be best to start with a recipe and then kind of work your way up to a PO and then essentially to whatever you need to do?
Okay. If you wanted to, you could literally create a recipe out of this, and then what you do is the recipe just allows you to reapply it in bulk over and over and over again, and it even has a thing called a multiplier. So if you figure out what it costs you to create one, and say you wanted to do 20 or 2,000 or whatever, once you figure out what it is to do one, you could say multiplier by 20, go get it, it'll add all of those different pieces up so that it multiplies across, and then you can pull it in through your PO that way.
So essentially when we make that, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, since he makes the same thing over and over again, he ought to do a recipe.
Okay,
I have a recipe for root beer that I then repeat over, and then when the recipe is made, because it's a certain amount per tank,
correct.
That automatically should give a rest amount of inventory, the same one.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And then that will, when I sell it, it will come out of essentially the recipe and inventory.
So here's an interesting piece, and you guys are totally on it, okay? The recipes, what it happens is you go like this, okay? It's another little tool that says, I might need to do something through an internal build to hit my general inventory pool, or I might want to sell in bulk or like certain kits, okay? So technically this doesn't do anything to inventory other than add things quick and fast to either side of the puzzle, PO side or the invoice side. This is how you manipulate your inventories, okay? Those are some great questions, and I don't have any problems if you guys actually, our goal today is to cover sales and inventory tracking. Do you guys want to go into recipes or something?
Can we do this, please?
Okay.
I think this is a great start.
Okay, awesome. Are there any other comments before we jump into recipes? Because basically what we did right there is we were doing an internal build PO, which was like a virtual miniature recipe. But in order to use that again, I'd have to say new PO, negative this, positive this. Like I'd have to build it one by one by one by one.
It's more ingredients, right? That are more items that we have to add into the system.
Technically, the recipe will basically, all it does is it references the different pieces, and then I can use it in bulk over and over and over again, okay?
Okay.
So like instead of building that PO line by line by line,
Because you built an internal PO, which was, back in the 90s for my inventory, it's not gonna, that's kind of a gift basket.
correct. And so like if they're doing this over and over and over again, they're probably going to be like, you know what, I do the same process over and over. Let me preload this or prep the
Yeah,
system
that's your
so that I can go faster.
That's it. But our recipe build means we're gonna break it down some more, like.
Yeah, there's two
It sounds
different
like you're
kinds of
eliminating
recipes.
processes by starting with the recipe build so you don't have to keep entering in that stuff.
Correct. It takes a little bit longer on the front end because you have to kind of say, okay, here's what we're going to do. But then when you go to use it, literally it could be like, bah, 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 bah,
And then,
bah.
Andy, real quick, is data entered in once, that's it, that's all you need.
Yep.
So
Under the
you don't
recipe.
have to enter in data in multiple times. Once you enter it in, it's either accurate or not accurate. You could just continue to use it, and it's always gonna be there.
Okay,
So,
awesome.
I mean, if it's not there, or if you don't have that item or product or anything available, inactivated, and it's not there anymore. So that means you're not gonna use it. But if it's, all you have to do is enter it in one time, right?
Correct.
Our root beer is the same, so
Oh,
why don't we just build a root beer?
Let's do a root beer
sell
one.
it?
Sure. Which pieces of the puzzle do we? So I can do a root beer one and use part number other, but I might not have all of your containers unless we want to just quickly add them. If you can tell me.
We
can
we'll just
physically-
use general numbers exactly what we did with
Okay.
I don't know
Okay, great.
specifics.
So basically the question was, this happens to be a site. Let's pretend that this particular nursery makes their own homemade root beer, okay? And I'm going to show you just a quick way how the recipe works. But technically what you'd want to do is you'd want to actually make sure you're pulling from the correct items. We haven't prepped it like that.
Yeah, we don't have to use a root beer. We'll just say it's a plant grow.
Okay, the same one that we just did?
And we'll just use arbitrary numbers.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to actually go back to that PO. Basically, I'm going to open it up. So right here, I'm going to hit Edit or Printable. It doesn't make a bit of difference. I'm actually going to go to Printable just because it might make it look a little cleaner. Piece of cake right here, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to actually build the recipe so that we can kind of do this, just so you can see what the recipe part of it is, okay? So I'm going to click here. We have not done this, but we did have to assign our permissions, and we did this earlier today. But we have a thing called the recipe build homepage. So we're going to jump into that homepage. Currently, I don't have anything going on. I'm going to say create a new recipe. And I'm going to say make pumpkin starter kit. Okay, and this is going to be a build and hold, which deals with POs instead of invoices. And it's eventually going to end up creating me 10 kits. And I'm not going to put a barcode, and ten pumpkin starter kits. And add the recipe. So what this does is it creates the main, and now we start adding the line items. So if I flip back right here, the first thing that we wanted to do was 10 flats, okay? So in the recipe, I'll just go with this, FLA. Boom. I'll find my flats. Here's my 6-count flat. Assign it to the recipe. And now I start popping down through here, okay? Quantity is going to be -10 of these guys. Go ahead and use the current cost. The cost field, I'm going to keep it, you can choose how open or closed you want this particular recipe. And I'm going to say add the item. My bad. Okay, so this is okay, this as an ingredient will be the negative, as an output will be the positive. So we'll go ingredient and just 10 of those. So we need 10. Okay? So basically here's starting to build my little miniature recipe right here. I'm gonna
So it shows -10 there, but when you actually put it in, you put a positive.
Okay, correct. It prompted me. It wanted to know, am I an ingredient or am I an output?
Okay.
So ingredient means I need, or negative. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to flip back here. The next little piece was bulk soil, and we needed 20 of those. So right here, I'll just add another line item, and I'll go bulk. I'll find it. Here's my bulk soil. Assign it to the recipe, and I needed 20 of those to come into it. It is going to be an ingredient. Here's the difference, or output, okay, kind of positive or negative. I'm going to leave that open and just say add it. So this is basically, this doesn't affect any sort of inventory. It's basically just building the actual physical recipe so that I can use it in bulk. The next piece of the puzzle was pumpkin. Looks like I need 1 package of pumpkin seeds. Add a new ingredient. See what I have under seeds. Here's PUMP. Pumpkin's a tough word for me. Okay, Acme Seed Company. Assign that to a recipe. And I just need 1 of those guys. And I'll just leave this a little bit more open and do it. Okay, then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say, what else did I need? I needed 20 of the bat guano. Sorry, my bad. Add a new item. Bat. Go find it. Assign it to the recipe. I needed 20 of those guys. And we'll say add it to my recipe. The next piece of the puzzle was manure, and I needed 1 of those. Once again, this would be really good if you actually really were doing this again and again and again. You would make a bulk manure so you didn't have to like keep breaking a whole 5-pound bag, 5-pound bag, 5-pound bag. Okay. But right now, we're going to pretend that we're doing this way. Okay. So add an item. There's my manure, add it as a recipe, and we're going to get 1 5-pound bag. And click this, say add the line item. Okay, so now basically here's all of my outs. Now my ins will create 10 of the positive. Okay, so I'll add new line item. And this is going to be my kits. Here's my pumpkin starter kit. Assign this to the recipe. This particular time, instead of an ingredient, this is going to be an output. Okay, this is a positive. And this is going to create 10 of these guys. And say add the line item. Now I'm skipping the notes here. I'm kind of just going fast. But watch this. -10, -20, -1, -20, -1, and then eventually a +10 for the pumpkin starter kits. Okay? So technically at this point I have right here ingredient, 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 output. It could be this fast to do a new build. So I'll go home just so you can kind of see the whole process. We'll go to the PO homepage. I'll hit right here, and I'll say a new purchase order, and I'm going to assign it to Greenway, which is us. Create the PO, and I'm going to say, guess what? Great, an internal build, new batch of starter kits. Come down, leave all of that just as it is, and say, yes, they're in my possession, go do it. Because I have a recipe, instead of adding pieces line by line by line, I'm going to go like this. Go get my pumpkin. Oh, perfect. Build prep. Okay, watch this. How many of these do we want to do? It creates 10 right now. So say we wanted to actually do 5 of these, and I hit submit. Watch what it's going to do to these numbers right here. This is the magic of a recipe. Okay, just multiplied my stuff. Do the build. So check this out. PO14 for $0. It came back the whole way through, and I just made 50 new pumpkin starter kits. So if I physically go to pumpkin starter kits, I have 60 on hand, and I just used a recipe to do it. That's how fast I built it into the PO. That's what a recipe does on the PO side. A recipe can also be used to sell things out if you needed groups. But that's kind of where it goes. Like, you have to prep it and spend some time on that front end. But if you wanted to do another one, it's literally like, I could even go like this. Watch this. Let's say that we wanted to create another 10 kits, 10 of the 10, okay? Vendor, I'll go green. Boom. create a new PO. It remembers I was on my internal build. More kits. Come down. Yes, they're in my possession. Do it. Click. Come down to recipe instead of items. Okay, little micro switch there. Come right here. Go pumpkin. Build prep. I wanted 10 more of the 10s. I'll hit submit, which will modify my numbers. Click. Modified all my numbers. Do the build. So now technically I've just adjusted my inventories incredibly, and now under my pumpkin starter kits I currently have 160 pumpkin starter kits. But check this out, if I hit back and I go to my pumpkin seeds, I now have 484 of those, and if I wanted to see where they went, it technically went here. Here's where I was pulling my different pieces, okay? Like all of your pieces are all connected once you do it if you play in that way and direction. Okay, that's a recipe. That's the speed and the power of it. You can just be like originally it's going to take you 10 to 15 minutes to set the thing up, but then I just made that thing in less than a minute, and it basically pulled in however many items, output my stuff, and it's all tied together, and it's just like, oh sweet.
So yeah, it seems like if you're on the production side of things, and then step one would be recipes, putting in all your recipes.
You prep the system, get that thing so it's got all the different pieces that I need.
Maybe you're not putting in the inventory yet, just getting it in there.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Once you prep it, you can get that thing going. But who's to say that you couldn't? Go ahead.
But it looked like the recipes were taking inventory out of the purchase order.
Okay, what ended up happening is
with the pumpkin seeds.
That is correct. Okay, I'm going to grab my little marker, and this might help a little bit. Okay. So we were kind of talking right here, recipes and builds, okay? So what ended up happening is we basically did this. Originally we said, we're the vendor, create a new internal build. Okay, use a recipe. This recipe took out a scoop. Instead of just an item and around item, it physically took out a scoop and assigned it to that PO, which basically alters my inventory counts.
And there are 6 different types of POs.
Correct. So that's just one type of PO. That's called an internal build. Literally, because you're doing manufacturing, you got to go like this. Back end, front end. Okay? You're going like this. Take a ton of back end, and I'll eventually get a couple little pieces of front end. Okay? That's kind of what's going on.
Yeah, so production is taken out of the back end, and sales is taken out of the front.
Correct. So the piece that I want to sell is now those pumpkin starter kits right here through invoices. And then basically what it'll do is, because it's already been assigned all those different little things, those things are out of my inventory. They now exist in a new item called the pumpkin starter kit. Now when I sell those, I'm not even worried about the seeds and all that kind of stuff, because it's already here tied into this little purchase order connection, the internal build PO. That's already fully accounted for.
But your recipe, the sugars are already going to be there, so when you create a purchase order for sugar, you're taking out a specific vendor, it's adding it into the back end.
Correct. When you go buy sugar, you're going to basically say, hey, I bought some sugar from Sam's Club or from XYZ vendor. You're going to pull it all into a general container called sugar, okay? And then your recipe is going to actually tell you how much of that sugar you're allocating out as you do your batches for root beer and your cream soda and your, like, et cetera, et cetera. That's how it's going to kind of work. Great questions. I love it. Awesome.